Good morning, Floyd. How are you? Nice to see you.
Thank you. Glad to see you.
We're here at the American Legion Museum on Sunday, July 17th, 2005. And this is part of our Library of Congress Veterans History Project. I'm Bill Payne, and also with us today is Alan Grzinski, who's handling the camera, and Matt McElreath, who's handling our computer. So we're going to get started with Floyd here. Floyd, tell me, were you drafted or did you enlist?
I was drafted on August 12th, 1942.
Where were you living at the
I
time?
was living in Teachel Street in Saugerties, New York, working for FL Russell Manufacturing Company.
You worked for the Russell Manufacturing Company. Okay. And what branch of service did you get drafted into?
Well, I ended up in the Air Corps, Army Air Corps. I don't know how that decision was made or why, but I went to the induction center in Warnecke. Spent about 3 days there getting your shots and uniforms, and had the second lieutenants give you help and not salute them when they went by, and all those little things that you weren't used to in civilian life.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went from there to Miami Beach, Florida on troop training. And of course there you had your basic training, and you stayed in hotels that were turned over to the Army. Mm-hmm. And you took all kinds of tests which determined what they were going to do with you, I guess. So you didn't. I was a dumb kid. I figured you went in the Army and you carried a gun, that was it. But I ended up going to Madison, Wisconsin to 2X Field Radio Operator School.
What kind of boot camp did you have down there? They put you through physical training and all that?
Physical training and shown over the drill, and every day we'd march out to the drill field, and a member of the American Legion here was Willie Cordy Stouts. He got those insignias on together. Yep. Poor Cordy didn't stay in the service too long. He wasn't coordinated to do that stuff. But we'd walk out to the drill field and be there all day, drill. And of course there was no lights on. It was blackout in Florida and the coast. And you had to be in bed a certain time every night. And they had 4 of us in a room on Army cots. Small room. And I got in my first trouble in there because they had me assigned to one bed, and actually I was in another bed. The guy was over here got sick. And he was in the John when they come around to inspect to see if everybody was in bed. So they accused me of being out when I should have been in bed. And of course we had the PFCs with the starched shirts, and he said I was going to scrub the hotel lobby with a toothbrush, but I wasn't there. And I said, hey, it's going to be a cold day in hell before I scrub any, because I was just a young kid and I wasn't ready to take that kind of stuff. And he said, well, you'll be here a long time. And I said, I got the whole war. Well, I'd go out on the porch of the hotel and rocking chair, rock back and forth, and every day he'd say, you ready to scrub the hotel lobby with a toothbrush? And I'd say, no. Finally, they got tired and they shipped me out. And, I went to 2X Field, the radio school, and I asked how they determined that this was where I was going to be. And they said, well, one of the tests they give you, you played a record and there was different sounds, and you could distinguish the difference between the sounds. That's before I went deaf. That's why I ended up in radio school.
That was Madison, Wisconsin?
Madison, Wisconsin.
2X Field?
2X Field. When I graduated before I graduated, my wife and my mother-in-law came out to see me, and I had got a case of kidney trouble. I suppose from traveling from the hot time in Florida to the 2 foot of snow in Wisconsin, and I was in the hospital, and if I'd stayed in the hospital another day, I'd have got moved 2 weeks up in a different class, had different time off, and they're coming from Saugerties to spend some time with me, and I'm not going to be able to see him. So I was friendly with a nurse in the hospital, and I told her the problem, because the doctor said, no way was he gonna discharge me. And she says, this is the way it works sometimes. She said, don't worry about it, I got a date with him tonight, when I get him half loaded, I'll have him sign a release for you. So the next morning she come in and she said, here's your release, get out of here before he comes in. So I shipped from there, and then they came out, and we had a good time together, and I finished in the class I was supposed to be in.
They traveled out from Saugerties by train, I take it, right?
Yeah.
And during World War II, it was pretty hard to
Yeah.
get train transportation, right? Yeah, so.
And, well, my dad worked in the railroad, so my mother had a pass on her way, and he arranged the tickets. From there, I shipped by troop train again to Atlantic City for overseas training. And I had 5 days home and then back there for training. And they give you all kinds of tests there too. And I took the flight test and was passed it. A friend of mine took it and failed it because he was colorblind. He ended up radio operator on B-17 flying out of England, which he was colorblind, he wasn't supposed to fly. And I ended up with a ground job, so that's the way things worked then. But from Atlantic City, I went back to Florida. And I was supposed to go to gunnery school, and I went to Boca, gunnery school. And I don't know what happened, but I got in there one night, and the next morning I was on a truck going south, and I ended up in Hialeah in a hotel there. They give me $6 a day plus my Army pay. The hotel charged me $5 for food and 50 cents to sleep on an Army cot up in the attic. So I had 50 cents left. It's the only time I sent home for money because I couldn't make it. And I got a case of sinus there real bad, and ended up being taken off shipment until it cleared up. And the people down in Hialeah at that time, it was a little one-horse town. There were dirt roads, and the horse racing stands were small, and it was big estates there. And people used to invite us GIs out to swim in their pools, play tennis, and this kind of stuff. And I guess I was there about 2 months with this sinus problem, and I'm out at a party in one of these big estates, and I'm playing tennis. And the doctor that's taking care of me happens to walk by, and he said, I guess you're ready for overseas.
As he caught you playing tennis.
Yeah, so I got a flight out of 36th Street Airport in Miami. We got a half-hour out over the ocean, and we lost an engine. And the pilot turned around and come back, and that's the first time I'd ever been on a plane. But, you know, nothing seemed to bother me in those days. I was young, and nothing bothered me. So it took 2 or 3 more days before I got another flight. And then I got a flight out of there, and I ended up in Tel Brazil, and French Guiana, British Guiana, and eventually hit the Gold Coast of Africa. And when we landed there, I become acquainted with a fellow from Texas, and we got to be pretty good buddies. They had a transit area with tents with wooden floors and wooden sides and big tent, 4 men in a tent. And when we got off the plane, they said, every morning look at the bulletin board. Your name will be there for shipment. Well, we looked every morning, our names weren't there. And every 10 days we go down to finance and collect our $60, and we paid $2 a day to eat and sleep in the tent and eat in the base. And we were shooting pool, and playing tennis, and playing cards, and really enjoying ourselves. I think I collected $500 and some with these $60 deals. And of course, $40 was clear on top of my overseas pay, flight pay, and my regular pay. So I was making more money than I made as a civilian. And we got in the crap game, the 2 of us, and I was laying the money, and he was handling the dice, and the MPs raided the place. Well, we end up in a big line, you get hell for gambling. And when they find out how long we've been there and how much money collected, all hell broke loose. They were going to court-martial us, and they wanted the money back, and we went to the head of the transit outfit, the captain, I think he was, and we said, look, we did exactly what you people told us. Every morning we looked at that board and our names weren't there. We don't know from nothing. We have to So he said, well, you don't have to pay the money back, and they're not gonna court-martial you. But you better look at it tomorrow morning, because you'll be going. So I ended up going across India, and I got to Agra, where the Taj Mahal is. And we were in a small tent there, just the two of us. And we went into town, went to the Taj Mahal, and went through that, went to other shrines that they had there. And the next day we were in line to get a pass to go again, and we hear the sergeant saying, Schulz and Pickens? No, they shipped out. And Pickens and I said, let's go back to the tent. We don't want to go anyplace. We're in no hurry to go anyplace. So they were a little bit smarter. In 10 days, we went and collected our $60, and they said, what are you doing here so long? And I ended up in Chagua, up in the Himalayas. And when I got there, they had so damn many radio operators, they didn't know what to do with us, but they had drafted a captain and 2 lieutenants from the Civil Aeronautics Administration. And they were sent there to set up flight plans from China to India. Because at that time, the ships were just flying on their own Apolos, and what was supposed to happen, they were supposed to be given clearances and headings to take off at, altitudes to cruise at. When I got to China, they were supposed to go through the same procedures. There was an imaginary line there from where one control turned it over to the other. So the 2 of us were trained as controllers, and we opened up a station in Chagua and started controlling the flights out of there, which was a lot of flights. And after that got operating, both of us transferred to Kunming, China, and opened up the station there, so it would be both ways going. And I stayed in China for about a year, I guess. And we had quite a few bombing raids there in China. The Japanese come in and bomb, but it looked like we weren't too concerned about it. All we do is try to clear the field of our bombing groups and our fighter pilots and let them come in and bomb. And they never seem to have a fighter escort just bomb the field, and we take off. They put red balls up. When the 3rd red ball went up, that meant they were dropping the bombs over the field. And they used a lot of personnel bombs with pieces of steel and stuff. And the buildings there were made out of wood blocks with straw and dried, and then they were laid up. And those shrapnel pieces would go right through that. And you'd come back to your office and there'd be all holes through the place there. But I was a senior controller in Kunming in one of the ships. And I had a corporal who was a young Italian fellow. And it was my responsibility to be the last one out of the office when they were coming. And when 2 balls went up, you'd get rid of everybody, and you'd stay until a 3rd ball went up, and then you'd clear out and go someplace. So, the first time I went out, I went to Swiss trench, and you get knocked back and forth, and you think you're getting murdered in there and hitting that yard. And the second time, they'd build these big pyramids, but they'd have logs zigzagging through them with logs over the top, and you'd go in there when it was over. But the dirt would come through the logs and down to the top, and it was horrible in there. So then I started getting in the Jeep and going up a mountain and watching it from the mountain. And this young corporal said, hey, you can get all the glory. You stay here and we all take off. I want to stay here. I said, fine, you stay, I'll go. Well, he got in the slit trench, and they hit right close to the slit trench, caved the side in. And the other people in the slit trench said he was howling and going on, I'm hit, I'm going to lose my arm. He wasn't hit at all. He just thought he was. But that was the last time he wanted to stay. He was ready to go after that. And I stayed there about a year, and I went into Kunming and got acquainted with a Chinese family that spoke English, and they had a young girl, and I was teaching her how to read English and do math and things like that. And I took time off, went up through the mountains and traveled, and went to to their theaters and movies. And I figured I'm never going to be here again. I'm going to see everything I can see.
Did you learn to speak the language at all?
No, only basic, just to get by. And that always amazed me because they picked up our English very quickly. And we were stupid. We didn't pick up their language as fast. And you stop and think about that a little bit. They had everything to gain by learning our, because they was looking to prosper at our expense, really. You know, you could sell anything in China. You'd walk down the street and come in, and they'd want your bracelet, your ring, your watch. And if you had mattress covers, they'd buy them. And if you had guns, they'd buy them. You know, they'd buy anything. Like a carton of cigarettes, we paid 50 cents a carton of cigarettes. They'd give you $25 for a carton of cigarettes. Bar of soap, at that time cost about a nickel. They'd give you $1 for it. My wife sent me a pack of 51 pen and pencil set and a special ink, a couple things of it. And I sold them in Payne for the ink for $50 a bottle and the pen and pencil set for $300. And I wrote her back and told her I lost it, sent me some more. She started sending me quarter pence. She said, I'm not sending you those expensive pens if you're going to lose them. Well, I could only get $25 for the quarter pence. I couldn't make as much on that deal. But we had, at one time I had 87 planes over the field. And it was kind of a crude setup because you only had one beacon over the field. And you'd bring the ships in at 500-foot separations. But you get so many over the field, you'd have to send them out on box legs. They'd fly at different headings on box legs, and as you could, you'd bring them back. And that would work fine until one of them was in trouble. Low on gas, or his motor went out, or some other kind of trouble. Then you had to clear the people and get him in there, get him down, and then start over again, you know. And the most I ever had was 87 ships at one time. But they were pouring, they had to bring all the gas for all the fighters and all the bombers and parts. And they didn't bring any food in. You lived off the land, which they fertilized with human fertilizer. And like I said before, the yellow carrot was white by the time you got to eat it. And there was all kind of rackets. A couple of the pilots said, we can bring you in some food, but it would cost an officer so much a month, and a sergeant so much a month, and a private so much a month. And they brought us in cereal and ketchup and mustard and this kind of stuff. We were glad to get it, but it was all Army food coming to us on planes that was supposed to be carrying gas, and this group of officers running this thing was getting rich fast, you know. But we were happy to get it. The first time we had cream of wheat. Oh boy, powdered milk and cream of wheat. This was great. You poured the hot milk on the cream of wheat, and all the little white maggots come up the top. And one GI looked at the other guy and take the spoon and scoop them off and eat the cream of wheat. He was so glad to get it, you know. And I traveled through the mountains in China. And then I got transferred back to Calcutta to open up a station there because evidently the Japs were pushed back far enough so that they didn't have to, from Shawa to Kunming and the other base in China, he was flying from like 18,000 foot up to clear the mountains. When they got down to Calcutta, they could fly out of Calcutta, they were flying at much lower altitudes. And there was no more bombings in Calcutta. India didn't get bombed that much. The only trouble I had there, I set up a new station in Calcutta. They flooded with people because I was getting, they had people they didn't know what to do with. I had 17 second lieutenant weather officers that were in my group running the station. And every once in a while, one of them would show me his bars, and I'd say, hey, I didn't put you here. You don't want to take orders from me, go tell the next guy. But that's the only place I got shot at, flying out of there and over, back in the company with new equipment to set up. I didn't realize what was happening. I said to the pilot, "What's that?" I could hear the pop, pop, popping on the aluminum plane. He says, "See that Jap over there? He's shooting at us." Well, they seemed like they really didn't care about knocking you down. They made a couple passes, probably emptied their machine guns and disappeared. And nobody got hurt. And we were landed, and I stayed there a few weeks and did my setting up with new equipment, and went back to Calcutta. But that's the only town I was shot at. I was bombed the field quite a few times. I went up from Calcutta. I took leave and went up to Darjeeling, where way up in the Himalayas. The English have a summer place up there that's where they sent their officers when they controlled India. And the temperature never went below 40 degrees, never went above 70. And we lived in little rooms and cottages like, with a fireplace, and in the night and morning it'd be about 40, and then it'd get up to 70 during the day. And you could walk out and the clouds would all be below you, and they were on top of them. They had horses there, they had one gate. You couldn't make them go faster than a walk, because it was all up and down, you know. And the people there were a little different. They were a redder skinned person and a shorter, stocky person. They could carry tremendous loads on their backs. And you got up there on a railroad the track was about a foot wide. And each car was real small cars, they'd hold 4 people. And I was up for 15 days, and I went on a freight ride, and I went through the small villages up there, and 2 things amazed me in both India and China. There was always plenty of eggs, but you never saw any chickens. And some of the things that any little village you went in had a basketball thing up that they played basketball. And yet they had the old grinding mills with the donkey pulling the grinding the grain, and you know, they were very backward. When it got so bad in Calcutta that I worked 6-hour shift. I'd work from 6 in the morning to 12 noon for 2 days, from 12 noon to 6 at night for 2 days. Then I had 2 days off. Then I'd go in from 6 at night to 12 midnight for 2 days, and from midnight to 6 in the morning for 2 days, and have 2 more days off. It just was flooded with people, and the war was coming to an end. And finally I got my orders to come home. The first stop was really any length of time was Casablanca.
Had the war come to an end then?
The war hadn't ended yet. I was coming home on to reassign, really.
Yeah.
And I had a parachute, and I had a flight bag with a 2-suiter, like. I had leather jackets with the linings and all kinds of equipment. I get there, and when I go to get on a plane to leave Casablanca, the sergeant in charge said, "You got to turn all that stuff in." I go, "Well, I'm not turning it in." "You're crazy. If you want to go home, you'll turn it in." I won't turn it in. So I'd go every morning. He'd say, "You ready to turn it in?" I'd say, "No." I'd go back to the transit area. And after 10 days, I said, "Take the damn stuff. I want to go home." So I ended up with an old duffel bag with patches on it and 2 khaki uniforms, 1 pair of shoes. All the good stuff disappeared, and it went on the black market. That's what it went. So it almost took the same route coming home. And the war ended when I was in Tel Brazil on the way back. And I flew into 36th Street Airport again, the same place I left from. And this Sergeant Pickens from Texas was with me. Both of us came home at the same time. And we were assigned a hotel, and we showered and took a nap because we'd been traveling. And we got up about 7 or 8 o'clock at night, and went down to a bar to have a few beers. And we were only in there about an hour, and the local sergeant come in, and the sergeant, Shulz, Sergeant Pickens, are you here? Yeah, we're here. You're on shipment. We'd only been here about 6, 7 hours, really. He said to him, how'd you know where to find us? He said, that you guys come back and overseas, the first place you hit is the bar. The next, that night, about midnight, I was on a train back to New York, and he was on a train going to Texas. And I landed in New York, traveled right straight through. Got in Grand Central, and they said, come back in a half hour size, go out and have a cup of coffee and something. You come back in a half hour, we'll have your orders cut to go home. So they had my orders cut for 30 days. Come home for 30 days to give me a 15-day extension because the war was ended and they weren't going to reassign me. And then they assigned me to a base on Long Island. And they said, look, we don't have anything for you to do. Fall out from Monday to roll call just in case there's orders for you. Go home. You stay home all weekend. It was just like Friday morning, fall out, you'll know you're here. Come back the next Monday morning, check in, and you're on your own. So I stayed there for a while, and then I went over to Westover Field, Massachusetts. That's where I was discharged from. And I had had malaria about a dozen times, I guess. And they said, you got a couple of fillings on Phil. I said, forget it, I'm going to fill when I get home. They said, you want to stay a couple of days, get processed, so you get a 30-day pension from all the times you had malaria. And I said, forget it, just give me my discharge. It was in the paper the day I was discharged, and you'd be surprised at that time how hard it was to get from Westover Field to Saugerties, New York. They give you like $7.50 I think it was travel. Well, you know, you had a bummer ride in the Hartford, then you had to wait, I had to stay there overnight, you had to wait and get a bus, you had to go to Poughkeepsie. And from Poughkeepsie, you had to get a bus back to Saugerties. So it took me, I visited some people in Connecticut that I knew. I think it took me almost a week to get from Westover Field back to Saugerties, you know. But that was my experiences in the service. And of course, I got in trouble a few times, and towards field going through code. You send for 50 minutes, you receive for 50 minutes and send for 10. And they had big rooms, and I was in a room 10 words a minute, trying to get out of there, and across the aisle was a 14-word a minute room. So in my mind, it was going to take me a while to get to 10 and then go into the 14 and get copy and 14 to go into the 16. And I fell asleep at night sending code because I wasn't used to being up all night. And while it was coming in your ears and you were receiving, you stay awake, but you're sitting there with the key sending, and the first thing you know, you'd be dozing. So they sent me in to see a staff sergeant, red-headed staff sergeant from the South. And the first question he asked me, where are you from, son? And my answer was, what the hell difference does it make? That wasn't the right answer. So for about 3 nights, I cleaned headsets, alcohol, swept the floor, cleaned the desk. And after about 3 nights, I went to the guy in charge of the room, and I said, I'm not getting my middle meal, because the meals were turned around because of the nights, you know. Normally breakfast would be supper. And I said, I'm not getting, I get 2 meals a day, I don't get the middle one, I'm in here cleaning this place. And I said, how long am I going to be doing that? And he said, you might be doing it a long time. I said, well, I want to see the base commander. He said, what do you want to see him for? I said, because I figure you can punish me, but you can't deny me my food, and that's what you're doing. Next night I wasn't on it anymore. I could get in trouble very easily because I was young and cocky. And after a while you get so you take a lot, but first off, you fight some of the stuff they try to pull on you, you know. And basically, the people who were in the service then that were running the show was people that had been in the service. They wasn't draftees. We had a sergeant in Madison that used to get the people for PX. He couldn't read. He'd come in the barracks, turn the lights on, and hand the sheet to somebody, say, read these names off. And all young guys like me, he can line you up outside the barracks, and as we marched down the barracks to go to the mess hall, a couple guys would keep falling off the back and disappearing, you know. He'd get down there and curse and swear. He wouldn't have only 2 or 3 days. He'd go back and start over again, you know. But he couldn't read. And there was a second lieutenant out there that was in the infantry. He was in the cavalry. And he had a fall and he had no jaw. Half of his jaw was gone. Well, he was a miserable old son of a gun. He used to hide around the corner of the mess hall. And it was winter. There was a couple of foot of snow on the ground. And you come out of the mess hall, he was going to run back to the barracks. You'd have your scarf and gloves and hat maybe in your hand. And he popped out from someplace and said, I thought you with your hands in your pockets, no day off this week. That was the main thing in life, was to catch somebody doing something wrong, you know. And the barracks was covered with tar paper. You could see through them almost. And they had big pot-belly stoves in there. If you was by a stove, you was too hot, you couldn't stand it. If you was 5 or 6 beds down the stove, it was freezing to death. When I happened to be right by a stove, my first experience there was, I know some of these aren't in order, but you stop and think about it. They had a PSC that was in charge of the barracks. And when I come in the morning after the calisthenics and time to go to bed after being in school at night, that fire would be going to be red, you know. And my cot was right there. I'd move it over against the other cot. And this PSC would come back and move it back and say, you can't have that out of line, it's got to be in line. And I took it for about 3 days, and I said, look, I can't sleep with that heat from that stove. I gotta move it over. Can't do it, you gotta have it there. Well, look, I'm gonna move it over one more time. And if you move it back, you better get out of here, because I'm gonna cold clock it. I moved it over, he moved it back. Before he got straightened up, I didn't have it under the chin, knocked him down across the room, and he got up, never did anything about it, but he never bothered me again. I left the bed where I could sleep.
What did you do after you got out of the service?
When I got out of the service, first I was going to be a controller, because that's what I was trained to be in the service. And I filled out all the forms to send them in. And I talked to Bud Banks, that used to own Bud Banks' car shop here in the village. He had been a controller. And he kind of talked me out of it. He said, that's a rough racket here in the States. And I said, it can't be any rougher than what I had. You know, it wouldn't have the kind of traffic and have better equipment here than we had over there. So I sent the papers in. In the meantime, I went to work for a telephone company. Well, it took 2 years before I heard from Civil Aeronautics. And then there was 2 openings, one in California and one in Alaska. And the starting salary was less than I was making with the telephone company. And my wife wasn't that keen on moving anyway, so I just stayed with the telephone company. And I was very fortunate. What made me with the telephone company was IBM, which is hard to understand, but I was a lineman to start out with. Then I had a small truck, and I'd go out and lay out new lines and do full inspections and do small special jobs. Then IBM opened up here, and they transferred me to IBM, and we had 10 telephone men in IBM permanently doing their jobs. Well, I didn't know any more than the guy next to me did, but the first job I went on, you knew you had to run the cable, and you had to print there and showed where the telephone went. But after the cable got in, I didn't know what to do, and the guy working with me, I said, "You're gonna have to do this." He was an older fellow. He said, "I'm just a tip and ring man, I don't know how to do this stuff." The foreman didn't know any more about it, and he said, "Well, here's the prints, use the prints." So I worked with the prints and cut the cables down, put the sets on, converted them for what the people wanted, and that was the start. It was, first thing you know, I was the lead installer, and then I was the foreman out there. And then I got transferred into Kingston to the repair bureau supervisor. And after 5.5 years there, I told them I wanted out, it was too much tension. And I got a double promotion to staff. I was building coordinator for Mid-Hudson for staff. And then I was running Monticello season for the summer, because in the summer and those years, you'd have 10,000 telephones to put in for people coming in there, local colonies, hotels, and this stuff. And then I went back to staff as installation staff supervisor. And I was there just a short time, and the vice president called me into the office and said, "How would you like to go to Kingston as plant manager?" And how much is in it? It was $1,600 more a year than I was making, and another promotion to another level. And I said, "I don't want to. I got 3 people working for me here, and no big worries." How many people I got up there? He said, "Oh, you'll have Kingston and Casco, 149 people." I said, "No way, not for $1,600 a year." So he said, "Well, think it over tonight, come in tomorrow," and he talked to me now. And then the next morning, I said, "I still don't want the job." And he said, "But you got it." So I ended up coming back to Kingston and stayed there for about 5.5 years. And the first week I'm back, there was a fellow by the name of Norm Townsend here that lived in Mount Marion that worked for the company. He'd been off sick for a long time. He had bursitis in his arm, they said. He come back, he was back for a week, and he was out on a case of trouble. And his wife called in about midnight and said, "Norm hasn't come home." And they got me out of bed, and I got the tester. It was the first woman that they made as a tester. And she said, "Norm told him," she wasn't supposed to go home till the last person was in. No more people out there. She said, "Norm says, I'll be all right, go ahead, go home." She closed it up and went home. Well, Norm wasn't all right. We found him sitting against a pine tree in the woods, dead. It wasn't bursitis in his arm, it was his heart that was bothering him. Well, that was the first week, and you're going to tell his wife like 3 o'clock in the morning that her husband is dead. It wasn't a very pleasant situation. Then the next day or the day after that, the ship went up dragging anchor up the Hudson and tore a cable apart. It was going across the river. I said, "Who needs this stuff?" You know? But I stayed there for like 4.5, 5 years before I went to another job. But I had just about every job you could find in the 35 years I was there.
How do you think your military experience affected your life after that?
Well, I don't think it helped that much. I was a person that didn't mind telling other people what to do in a nice way and getting along with them. I had a older man that worked for me in IBM, and he was very annoyed at the fact that I was his supervisor. And I forgot more about this business than you will ever know. And I told him, "Yes, you do, Harry. You know more than I do. You forgot more than I do. But you don't know how to handle people. And that's why you're still working instead of being well in my place." And he accepted that. In fact, when he retired, I was one of the people invited to his retirement party.
I see you brought some papers here. Would you show them to the camera? What do you got
Well,
there?
that's actually just my discharge and places, the ribbons that I got. And,
What do you have there?
I'll tell you the truth, I haven't got my glasses. So
Okay, let me read them then. Presidential Unit Citation, Distinguished Unit Badge, Asiatic Pacific Theater Ribbon, with 2 battle stars. And you served in the India, Burma, China campaign. So, and an honorable discharge.
So that's my story.
Well, thanks a lot for sharing with us, Floyd. We appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Give you too much, or?
There's never too much for history. Good? That's great. Thanks a lot.